Wait, are we doing a podcast already?
We're doing it right now. We're going to
Let's
go
go.
right now.
So
Yeah.
this is it.
That, by the way, that response is usually what we get with our podcast.
I was like, that sounded like a podcast type of question right there.
Yeah.
What did you say? How's my YouTube going?
Yeah. How's the S3 YouTube thing going?
Not good.
Yeah. Why?
I don't like YouTube. I don't watch YouTube, so it's only fair that our YouTube doesn't do much.
But
The only thing I watch on YouTube is how to fix a car that I've broken.
Yeah.
In which case, I don't want to hear anything but how to fix it. I don't want to hear your 30-second intro or any of that crap. Or I listen to reggae videos, or I listen to 80s like hair metal videos. And I go back in time and rewatch all that stuff, and I realize how far we've fallen. And that's what I use YouTube for. I don't care about any of the YouTubers' cars or, any of that kind of stuff. I just don't care. I mean, I wish them well. I hope they have fun building their cars, but I just think I'm too old for that crap. Every time I say that, somebody about my age goes, "No, man, I watch it all the time." Huh? But
do you think?
I
Do
don't
you
care.
think, for the record, we can just say how old you are?
I'm 44.
Okay.
Yeah, don't let the immaturity and dumb hair fool you.
Well,
44. You can tell in this. If this is being videoed, this wrinkle right here is my tell.
So I'm coming up to 42, and I'm the polar opposite of you.
Yeah.
Well, I think the majority of the stuff that I end up watching, if it's not on some sort of, first off, I don't watch a lot of TV at all. I don't have time. But let's say the time is there. I think the majority of the stuff that I run through, whether it be, whatever, is either going to be Netflix or Prime, right? Because they're easy to push on the button for the remote on my TV. Yeah. And aside from that, it's YouTube, right? Like I feel like you said, like I get all my, I wonder what, because I feel like it's like it's the most 3D type of search engine, right? Like, I mean, to me, I'll be thinking about something like, man, like, how long has anybody made any really long oil cooler lines? And I'll type it in, and all of a sudden somebody's video pops up, and it's like, man, I shouldn't have made these 22 feet long. You know what I mean? And then, there's just a bunch of random things. And I do like to see kind of what's going on out there in the world. I think it's fun to see. I take it with a grain of salt, right? Like I know that what I'm watching on a 90% probably ratio is exaggerated or made to be, kind of in a different situation than it actually is behind the camera. But I also chalk it up to entertainment. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I just don't like YouTube. I don't like the format for it. I don't like that the cars are built for exposure rather than built for the heart and driving. Every YouTuber that I've had exposure to, it's not what they want to do, it's what's going to get views. I don't think that's good for car culture. It's good for viewership, like you said, but I don't think it's great for car culture. I don't like the turn and burn mentality where, okay, we built it, so now we're going to sell it. Like, to me, I guess I'm getting, can I cuss on this? I guess I'm getting real, but like, that's poser stuff. You know what I mean? Like, to build a car for views and then sell it to fund the next one, I'm not about it.
All right.
Do your thing.
Tainting the waters.
What's that?
It's tainting the waters. Like, it's sort of, it's taking away what, sort of what we would envision or what other folks would envision as car culture. And it's going after search terms and what can get the most clicks versus what is actually done in normal everyday car wrenching.
Yeah. If I was going to give advice, I would say, if you're going to go down the YouTube path and you're going to pursue that, make it relatable. If I'm going to learn to play basketball, I don't want to play with LeBron James. He's going to beat my ass, and I'm not going to want to do it anymore. I'm going to want to learn from somebody that's got a little bit more wisdom at it than me, and that's willing to teach me, right? Like, that's the problem with the YouTube thing.
But let me ask you a question, though. Let me ask you a question. So, listen, I think the point's valid. I get what you're saying, but what I'm saying is this: what about for the people? Because I think what we're doing here is we're stereotypically thinking of a quote unquote YouTuber, and then we're applying that to our thought process here. But what about for the guy that legitimately is doing these projects in real time? I mean, maybe they have a decent following, but they're not building anything other than the cars they want to build. And this is a document of their story. Are we in the same boat now?
I mean, I guess so, but that ship's kind of sailed, right? Are people still do? You say, we're stereotyping a YouTuber. Well, there is that stereotype of a YouTuber, that's been defined over the past 7 years or whatever it's been. But I don't know. For me, I'm old. I have a kid. I have a busy life. I don't want to watch a 24-year-old build, whatever, a 240SX. Like, I don't care. I like cars. But I don't care about following that. What I want to do is listen to some Russian guy tell me how to fix my M50 that I blew a head gasket on. Like, that's what I'm there for when it comes to the car world.
All right, but here's my thing. Coming from the publishing world, and for those of you watching, and I have to do this because we're in that realm right now. You're one of the co-founders of S3, right? S3 Magazine.
Yeah.
Right.
Magazine.
And I would say, and we've had this conversation, I don't know, maybe 200-300 times, that we have talked about the fact that S3 is a brand, while it was originally intended upon being obviously devoted to this print tangible publication, is still a brand that is there for editorial purposes about car builds, lifestyle around car builds. That's an acceptable statement at this point?
Yeah.
So I've argued multiple times throughout our history here is that, like, hey, man, the brand needs to live on. The way the S3 brand lives on, it's got to go to YouTube. And you're like, man, like, just not what you want to do.
Right.
So I guess what I'm saying is, so now that puts you into a unique position where whether you like YouTube or not, whether you want to be on Instagram all day, whether you understand, and really believe in the digital premise to this whole thing. And yes, it's a rat race, right? From a creator standpoint.
Yeah.
But you kind of got this thing where, like, to move the legacy of S3 forward, you're either going to have to move into these channels or come up with an alternative way to make the print thing desirable, or find the angle where print becomes desirable for your audience, right?
Yeah. Well, for anybody that, is watching that doesn't know who the hell I am, like, yes, we did S3. I didn't actually found it. I got hired at S3 shortly after college. And at the time, it had been around for about 4 years. It was kind of bland and stagnant. They had a motorcycle magazine under the same house that was killing it. And so it was dragging S3 along. He decided to hire a couple guys to refresh it. I was one of them. Very shortly after, a West Coast conglomerate was going to buy it to kill it. So I basically got laid off. I said no. And finally, after saying no enough times, he was like, look, they're buying it to kill it. We'll sell it to you. We'll let you use the office. We'll teach you how to publish. Because I only had about 6 weeks experience.
Is that right?
I'd written some articles. And that's what he said. Is he was like, look, no offense, just because you've written some articles doesn't mean you know the first thing about how this actually works. So we're going to teach you. And I was like, okay. So, in 6 weeks, I went from, getting hired to owning it. And that was early 2006. So it was a wild ride, and it was driven by the fact that I didn't want to go back to my old boss. He's awesome, but I didn't want to go back to him, and fail. And also, this was my foot in the door. I was 25. I was as old as a lot of the YouTubers I just made fun of. I was 25 years old, all of a sudden had a magazine, and it was our foot in the door. Like, we never thought it would actually work. We dreamt that it would, but in my opinion, it was a resume builder, like I was just trying to get my foot in the door.
Yeah.
Anyway, 2006, drifting is huge. The import scene is still huge. Magazines run the world. So even though we sucked, we had some good tire advertisers that were getting us through. We had Toyota under the Scion brand had hit us up, and we told them the story, and they were like, we're gonna advertise, we're gonna set our own price, go conquer the world, kind of a thing. And I'll love Toyota forever for that reason. But so, we were able, whatever, in the late in 2006 through 16 or so, we're able to sustain, and print because it's what we love. Now, were we getting rich? Were we flying on private jets, smoking cigars? Absolutely not. But it was a passion project, so we did what we had to do. Then as in those days, we were always battling the other big magazines, the corporate magazines. And we developed a very punk rock attitude. It's what we were born on. Yep. And we were like, F the man, F the, corporations and the sold out stuff. And so we were battling the big magazines. Then those started falling. But we weren't on top because then we were battling the internet. You know what I mean? And we're battling
right.
social media and we're battling all that stuff.
Right.
We stuck it out, long story short, because I know I'm rambling. We stuck it out until 2 years ago. So 2022. And we were still selling ads. We were still making it work, but it was this post-corona shortage BS, which pretty much infiltrated every industry. Well, it hit the paper industry. It hit it hard. Our own printer, like of all the things trying to take out print, I never thought it would be the printer. But the printer was basically like, yo, we can't get paper, so it's going to cost you more, and we're going to need you to buy it for the year. We couldn't do that. You know what I mean? Like we were paying basically per issue and getting the paper. And it used to take about 2 weeks, from when we turn a file in and we get the magazine back in our hands. It started taking about 6 weeks, and it started costing about 15% more every time.
Yep.
And it was like, this can't.
You can't sustain that.
We cannot do it. And yes, we could fight and get another issue out, but then what? You know what I mean? Like it was over. So that's when it's like you said, I've never been a YouTube. It's not there. It's not in my DNA. But we did see that writing on the wall. We did make an app, and it was actually you that planted the seed. Because I remember on one of our conversations, all right, so this is what Scott said. Scott's like, I love the magazine, and we'll support it till the end. But come on. Like, how long does print have here? How long do you have a plan? Like, I want to see you guys survive. But, know, and I was like, man, I think I would rather go get a job than try and pursue YouTube. It's awkward. It's phony in a lot of cases, and it's just not kind of who I am. At least that was me talking like, 2 or 3 years ago. And you were like, well, what about an app? And I was like, do I look like I can build an app? Like, I don't know about that.
But they have people for that, right?
Yeah, the seed was planted. And after we hung up, I was talking to Mike and like, man, Crazy Scott says we need an app. And he's like, well, hang on a second. Like maybe we can get this done. And I was like, what's that?
Maybe there's something onto it here.
Yeah. And Mike is my business partner, one of my best friends, polar opposite of me. So like, whereas I tend to bounce around and, and I'm, I guess, creative or whatever and passionate and romantic about stuff, he is pretty disciplined, and so he just started going down the path and we figured out how to do it. And thank God we did. Right. And the other thing, like, because honestly, post-print S3, like nobody, has anybody really pulled it off? You know what I mean? Has any magazine really authentically pulled off no more print? No. It's like a rock star trying to not play rock. Like it's kind of difficult. And so I was struggling with, is this something we even want to pursue? Do I even want to go down this road? I mean, we did it for the art of print. Do I want to do it to be another tiny fish in a big ocean of creators? Like these words that we've made up, influencers and creators. And I was like, man, I don't know if that's me. I'm not a video guy. I'm a writer. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to square peg, round hole kind of thing. And then it just so happened that like one of the benefits of not doing a print magazine every couple of months is that you could do daily content. And the EV thing was really popping off 2 years ago. And there was a lot of, EV is the future talk. And it just kind of fell in our lap. Like we didn't plan to start doing kind of news related things, but because, we had the time and we could post it and put it out right then and there, we started going into like, we're like, you know what? There's a void of like, when I look at whatever we call automotive journalists these days, like we're using that term real loosely. Like I personally would not, I barely call these guys automotive enthusiasts. Like they're they're out there preaching a future that is void of all the things that made us fall in love with cars, the tangibility, the real essence of driving. They're more concerned with mobility. And so I was like, screw this, man. There needs to be automotive journalists. We may be wrong, but at least we're passionate. And there's no doubt that we're passionate. You might disagree, but there needs to be automotive journalists that come from car culture again. So if we can blend the radical car culture custom side of what we did and live in the lifestyle we apparently got to teach these people what we dislike about the new cars, because they don't get it. They're like, it's faster. Why don't you like it? And I'm like, oh my God, we're having different conversations. We have different exposure and different experiences. And I feel like that needs to be heard right now in this automotive climate. So long story short, we started doing the news and it started building, it started kind of, I don't want to say going viral, but it had a voice. And it wasn't on YouTube. It was more on TikTok and it was more on Instagram Reels. But a lot of people disagree with it. But a lot of people are like, yo, you guys are saying the stuff that, Jalopnik ain't going to say or whatever. In their mind, speaking the truth. So
it goes back to when you think about sort of some of the content that's made on YouTube, it's more for clickbait and just sort of views and, current, say some automotive news articles are more geared towards, what's in the current news cycle versus what's relevant to automotive.
Well, and when YouTube first started coming up, it was organic and it was authentic, and it was the enthusiasts that had a voice against the man and against the corporations and against the Jalopniks and against the watered down media and the clickbaity media. But they became that. Like when I look at a YouTuber now that is 100% building content off of what's going to get views past 30 seconds and putting their little face in the thumbnail picture and then talking about how great, the press car that they got because they're now in with RTR, Mustang, Ford, whoever it is, like they became what they were against. The beauty of YouTube became the very monster that they were up against in the first place. That's why I don't like that.
Man, I love this podcast because here's why. Every podcast, Max finds 2 or 3 clip outs that he puts on social that paints me as this evil villain. And people go into the comment section and they tread all over it. And today, my friend, I guarantee that I won't be in the comments.
I mean,
but here's the thing. I don't disagree with what you're saying.
I don't. The thing is, I don't care. It's
I know. That's what I love about this.
Yeah. When you're a media company that's hanging on by a thread and they took your print away, you just don't care anymore what the commenters say. Like, you just don't.
But here's the thing. I think at the bottom line of this, majority of enthusiasts feel the same way, right? Like at the end of the day, maybe not to as extreme level as you do, but I believe that they do, because here's the thing. I'm not talking about the representation that the internet may bring. I'm not talking about all the comments that may be in the threads of something about a Tesla or anything like that. I'm not even saying that you can't be an enthusiast if you're into EV. What I'm saying is that there's a tremendous amount of people and enthusiasts that are into cars for the things that become tremendously visceral, right? That raw feel of shifting a gear, rowing through the gears, that raw feel of having the steering kick back on you and feeling the road and like having that manual capability to kind of do things with a car that takes some skill set to learn. And all the people that have developed that skill set have a history of making mistakes that they remember, which make them have this little bit of a skill set. I mean, it's just how it is. Like, you start driving cars. Like, I could think about the first time, like, I almost put my all-wheel drive car into a wall. Like, pretty easy. Like, all you have to do is think the car is invincible because it's all-wheel drive, put a little bit of oil or from from somebody else in front of one of the tires, and that thing goes sideways, right? So I think that, look, a lot of the things that we've built up with, and I think there's a level of nostalgia, right? Like, there's always going to be that, like, wanting something that you had. And I think that the problem that we're going to run into, the same way I think what hot rodders ran into, right? Like, I mean, look, there's a reason, and here we go. This is going to be, everybody's going to call me out on this, but like, there's a reason that hot rods were going for way more money 10 years ago. It's because all the people that own those cars that were super into those cars, they're all dying off. I mean, literally, they're dying. Like, they've gotten old, and now that level of car, I mean, not that you're not going to find anybody that wants them, but it's not the same. And the same thing's happening with 90s Japanese sports cars, right? We're watching it right now. Everything that's nostalgia to our group of people that have expendable incomes and are, want to buy things, they're just shooting up. And that's, I think, a hard part for us is because we're watching these cars now become so unobtainable that the guys like you and me that want them the most probably won't ever get one. But it's still that very visceral idea of, having a manual capability, having that ability where, it's not too much. It doesn't have too much tech in it. It's not, it's, something that's simplistic, even though there's a lot more moving parts,
Well,
sorry, go ahead, Wooly.
Well, I was going to say, that reminds me of kind of a story that I heard. Like, down here in Georgia, we have something called Gamma. It's like the Georgia automotive media, blah, blah, blah. And like all of the media, the press cars, basically, the people that get the press fleets and stuff like that, a lot of them belong to this organization. So they're at this organization and everybody's sitting, it's like a little conference thing. And everybody's sitting there. And one of the guys, an old school guy, kind of a hot rodder drag racer guy, was like, but he was in charge of the Hondas at the time. So he was the middleman to bring the Hondas.
Of course.
And he was like, all right, so how many of you guys can drive stick? How many are proficient in stick? And out of 25 people, he said, like 3 raised their hand, which means like 20 plus automotive journalists in the modern era cannot drive a stick. Now, how the hell can they be automotive journalists? How can they have just the exposure and experience to understand what they're talking about? And that's why all they can talk about is range and screen size, because it's all they know. Meanwhile, people like you and me have, 20, 30 years of like experience under our belt. We've driven a gutted Honda with VTEC at 8,000 RPMs and everything. We've driven air-cooled Porsches. We've driven boosted Supras. We've driven all of this stuff. We have a wealth of knowledge. Now, when you're 20 years old and you're watching YouTube, cars are rad, and that's as far as it goes. Yep. But when you get to be our age, it's not about the superficial. It's not about the material car. It's about the lifestyle. Like, I try really hard to live the lifestyle. You know what I mean? Which means you're breaking down, you're wrenching on stuff, you're putting your daughter in questionable builds and cars and stuff like that. And that's just the way it is. Like, so while I think YouTube has its place to view and to, I say that, but as soon as I say that, I doubt myself, because you got a bajillion kids watching YouTube these days. But when I go to my daughter's school, there ain't cool cars in the parking lot. So I think that the YouTube creates a viewership, a voyeurism of car culture. I think that magazines hit less people, but it hit them here. It lit a fire inside of you that you wanted to be a part of it. And I can prove that because a couple of years ago, I got into stand-up jet skis, retro 2-stroke stand-up jet skis. And a friend of mine handed me a magazine, and I felt that again. I don't feel it with cars because I've been doing it for so long, but I felt what I used to feel with cars, which was I read this magazine and I got totally freaking amped. And the ads that were in it, they weren't a distraction. They weren't bothering me. Like, I wanted to know about them. I wanted to read about it. And I just got so fired up that I went and worked on this $400 jet ski I bought that needed fiberglass work. You know what I mean? Like, it's quality over quantity. But this world is focused on quantity. We cannot break the addiction to the numbers.
But it's
car culture needs to realize it ain't about the numbers. We are a niche culture. We are not mainstream, and we need to protect that.
So this is the conversation we've had we've had this conversation hundreds of times over the past 8 years. I mean, like, endless. And the problem that you have as a brand, and I'm not saying just as us as a brand, I'm talking about like even S3 as a brand or Motor Trend as a brand or some of these other, different magazines that are either there or not there or whatever it may be, is that when print ends, which is primarily where your medium was focused on, you have to either transverse this thing into another medium, or you have to almost admit death, right? Like, that's the hard part. And when we start to move it into another medium, what we're really talking about is the idea that you then have to be relevant to the platform that you're putting this media on. And the hard part about all of it is the fact that when you go to basically developing so much of this media on these platforms, because of the level of noise, you have to supply a certain level of quantity with a certain level of quality to be able to gain that attention. And that's the difficult part. But with that all said,
we're in an age where media is driven by a big tech algorithm. So what you're essentially saying is, okay, so now that print isn't here anymore, you have to take your unrestrained voice and you have to funnel it. You have to talk in SEO. You have to, do the stupid games where like, oh, I'm going to tell you in just a second. But first, let me tell you about this. And all the little things that work on YouTube that make YouTubers. Like, I hate that. You said at some point you have to admit defeat. I would rather admit defeat than let your voice be funneled through a big tech algorithm that just wants you living on a screen and they don't want the same future for cars. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they don't see it like we do. Why are we playing by their rules? We should have never gotten to this point.
Wait,
you made a good point though. Yeah. Like, so, the mediums have changed, right? But I think it's more of an adaptation to the medium itself. And like in the case of print, like I think about 000, right? Which is a very it's quarterly print. It's a big book. I don't know if you can really, it's almost like a coffee table magazine kind of thing, right? And so they've shifted their model away from say like a monthly perspective and gone towards a quarterly where the stories are a bit deeper. Like there's just a bit more sort of being elaborated on. And the overarching thing I'm hearing from all this is storytelling, right? We have these older cars or we've wrenched on cars for a period of time that afford us the ability to have these stories talk about like the manual shifting of the car, no power assist. Like there's a story that comes from the car, and it seems like new editorials are missing that story because the car has basically neutered the story. Like all we can talk about now is, well, I got good range here, and this is the MPG that I get versus like I feel every bit of the road in the wheel. Like the throw of my 915 transmission is the length of a bus, right? Like I have to plan the drive. Like it's not, like, especially like when I'm driving that car, the phone is tucked away in the glove box, so I don't even want to deal with it because it's there's so much of a story going on. Versus you go get a new electric car and it's like you put your phone there, steering wheel does this thing for you. Like now you're just existing.
Right.
And it's print has this sort of romantic side of it that, because we're not telling those stories anymore, we've kind of lost print, or the print has, fallen down a little bit. And there's been some outlets that have adjusted to the sort of lower number and, adjusted to the scene. Does it continue to exist though?
I mean, print is tangible. Just like an old sports car is tangible. It's physical. It's a real thing. The new cars match the new media. It's digital and it's kind of fake. And it's just, like a new Porsche. You can go dive into a turn that you had no business making it through. The car will get you through it, pat you on the back, and tell you what a good driver you are.
Wait,
that's not.
But John,
don't not a sport.
Let me propose a counter view here. Okay,
bring it on.
So here's the thing. At the end of the day, we can say what we want about YouTubers. We could say what we want about the algorithm. We could say what we want about every single thing that is in, let's say, quote unquote, the popular way to view automotive culture. However, don't you think that there's this level of inspiration that comes for people that really haven't been exposed to certain car things that brings them into this love of cars from it? Because here's my problem with all of this is that without some of these channels, these cars, these different things, whether you like it or not, whether we like it or not, you run into an issue where some of these people would have never had the exposure with some of these cars and some of these builds and what kind of things go into this stuff, because all they would have been able to grow up with are cars that have this high level of tech that don't require nearly the same type of kind of, I don't want to say skill set. It's not a skill set, but like the same type of love of driving that a lot of these cars came with. I mean, look, I would, even if you go down to the print days, there was a far different reader that was reading Import Tuner versus reading maybe your book or reading a book like a D-Sport or something to that effect where it's a little bit more technical, right?
Or like EMR zine or something like that, like the pocket zine that was out back in the day.
I just think that like at the end of the day, there's always going to be different level, and I don't want to. It's so hard because I don't want to sound condescending to actual enthusiasts, because I think we can all agree that there's such a huge level of different type of enthusiasts, right? From right up to something that's a little bit more superficial to somebody that's like really too far deep in the technical weeds, right? But in the same respect, you know, if like I've always said, if you're into cars, it doesn't matter to me what kind of car you're into, as long like you're good with me. You know what I mean? Like I just want to know that there's other people that appreciate the fact that they're more than just getting from point A to point B. And I think that's what infuriates me so much about a lot of the, and I'm not going to go political, but the legislation and different things like that. Because when you read between the lines, or sometimes if you just read, it basically just says, like you're only supposed to use these things to get around. So it negates everything that, you know, what automotive was. I mean, man, I can't help but think like, I mean, like, listen, when you go back and see some of these movies, and yes, they're movies, but you go back and see some of these movies, the Ford versus Ferrari, the Lamborghini story, like these are about building driving machines, things that you can do with these machines that make you feel like you got some power, some superhuman power. For me, and I know this for you, like, but for me, you know, you're very into the lifestyle portion of it, and I get that, because I was for a long time, but now like I've gotten old and fat and lazy and, you know, whatever. But for me, all that ever matters is the car. Like people say about cars, to, you know, when I hear them and I listen to them talking, like, you know, there's some people that are very, very conscious about what they're driving because it means a lot to them what that car portrays outwardly. And for me, I would have an entire car collection. Listen, if it was up to me, I would have a little tiny house, really tiny house. Well, I do, but what I mean is I'd have a same tiny house, and I'd have this really mega mansion that would just basically be the biggest garage you've ever seen. And like, in that garage would be all these cool cars and a lot of cars that no one would find cool because I think they're cool. And it would just be about the car. I could lock myself in one of these big garages for years and be totally fine with just working on different cars that I think are cool. And I would never care about anything else.
Well, that's called a barndominium, by the way.
But first off, I understand what it is because it's my highest level of want right now. But yeah, I mean, like, I just think listen, you know how you can know you're an obsessed nut? Like, I want a GTR. Now, when I say I want a GTR, the reason I haven't said which one is because I want them all, every single one of them. But the reason that I want a GTR is kind of ridiculous. It's because, one, I want to be able to sit in it. 2, I want to be able to save it. 3, I want to make sure that I can drive it anytime I want. And 4, in the middle of the night, sometimes when I can't sleep, I want to go outside and just hug it. Now, these are things that I do because at the end of the day, I'm obsessed about cars. But cars to me aren't transportation. In fact, they're so not transportation that they become transportation. For example, like what I drive every day, it's not fun. I just need it to pick up the kids and do the thing, whatever. And I can feel okay about that because at the end of the day, I have other things at my house that I know are fun. I justify one with the other. Now, the other part is I want to get a new car. I cannot find one car that I can reasonably afford that I want to get as a daily driver. Not one, because it does nothing for me. So I'm just like, I might as well stay in the same thing, because it does nothing for me. There's nothing that I have that I can find out there that I'm like, yeah, this will do all the things.
It's almost as if the personality is getting lost in automotive,
Well,
like in the cars themselves, right? Like a similar thing where over the weekend I was, working on the wife's car, and I noticed that someone used the wrong screws for putting a seat piece in, and I couldn't help but think of, like, who hurt you? Why did they do this to you? Why did you use the wrong parts? Like, just do it the right way, and folks are just trying to force their way through to kind of get things done versus, going back to sort of the romantic side of automotive and why we do what we do. I mean, I share the sentiment where, when I moved out here, I was like, I wish my garage was bigger so I could put more cars in it. And, more cars that, like the family hauler is almost 20 years old. Kids love it. Everything's great. Like personality. And, to your point, we look at new cars and it's just, what's there? Like, waiting to, the footnotes aren't even enough to, give me a story about what you're trying to sell me or what I should get my hands on, because everything is so focused on tech or, just numbers as opposed to the visceral feeling of driving.
Wooley buys farms to keep his cars in.
I mean, it's like, it's the difference between Jimi Hendrix and music made on an iPhone. And that's the thing, is that these new cars, they are all about the tech and the screens. They've actually made me hate tech, a handful of years ago. I didn't care one way or the other about tech, but it's the way tech is being used. It's the way EVs have been introduced to us under a lie and pushed on us when it could have just been introduced as a thing. You know what I mean? But it was kind of, it was a freaking agenda. It was a lie. Wow. It was brought to us and like, you have to, if you don't drive this, you hate the earth. And meanwhile, they're masking the realities of the thing. And then, with going back to the YouTubers, I think YouTube, we used to have car enthusiasts. Now we still do, like what you guys were just talking about. But then we also have clout enthusiasts. And the YouTube and the Instagram generations, I think it's hard for them to differentiate the two. I don't blame them. I think it's the world we're all living in. I think to a certain point, we all kind of do that. But I deliberately don't care what you have to remind yourself, but like I deliberately don't care what the internet thinks. I would rather, you guys were talking about family haulers. I don't have one. I got like 9 cars, I think 7, maybe 6 run, and none of them are conservative. Like none of, like the most family car I have is a lifted, completely muddy Jeep on 37s with never has any doors on it.
All right, hold on 1 second. What does your wife drive?
4Runner TRD Pro.
Okay, but fairly the way it came from the box. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. When you guys go to a wedding, which car do you take?
That just depends. If we're going to a wedding, I'm trying
hold on a second. If we're going to a wedding at you're wearing a suit, which I know doesn't probably happen all that much for you, but if you're wearing a suit, you're going to a wedding, maybe the church before, what car are you taking?
It's the Jeep or the 4Runner.
I understand.
Probably about 50-50. Because my wife will ride in the Jeep dirty so that we don't have to take her car because she drives it all the time because she's in real estate. Yep. So she doesn't care about that.
Yeah.
She hates the Fiesta. I have a Fiesta ST. That's my other new-ish, what you would call a family car. She hates that car. It's small and, she doesn't see the appeal. Like it's a Fiesta,
I get it.
Like she just doesn't get it. But that's the thing. Like I have no problem as a 44-year-old man driving a Fiesta with a propped up wing on the back. Like I just don't care about the image side of driving.
I agree.
I care about the therapy side.
Yep.
Like I love the adventure of driving. I love the physicality of driving. It frustrates me that people, I know not everybody's going to be about it like I am, but it frustrates me that they're not, and that they don't have the exposure to it, and that they don't care. It frustrates me when people buy new cars because they're missing out on something that I'm trying to explain, and they don't quite get it. You know, it's the age old like automatic versus manual, and they go, well, the automatics are faster these days. I'm like, but you don't get it. I want to put you in this car so that you can get it. You know?
I know, but the clout-based thing, just to kind of circle back real quick.
Yeah,
that's always been there, man. Like, I think about it to the point where, like, I mean, it's maybe more abundant because people feel like they could chase it faster. But, like, listen, when I think about, you know, going back way in the day and, like, I mean, our social media was going to local parking lots and local hangouts where you knew the local car clubs were, right? Like, I think about it from a perspective of, like, there was always for us, it was like there'd be the car club that was the cool car club in the area, or there'd be the couple guys that were the fastest or had the biggest builds or whatever it was. And, like, they were the guys that had everybody circled around them. And, you know, the Fast and Furious kind of pokes at it a lot, right? Like the Dom Toretto kind of thing where you got that one guy that's kind of the circle of it all, and he drives what kind of parts people buy because he uses them. Magazines were like the reason you read magazines was to get ideas and see what else was out there because you didn't have the internet shoving it in your face every 5 seconds, right? Like I remember, waiting at 7 or showing up at 7-Eleven, like literally on the day that I knew that they were going to put some of these, you know, magazines on the newsstand, because I would grab them, take them home, read them obsessively, cut pages out, like look at the parts. Like that's where I did my research, right? And then, you know, it obviously grew to the point where the more you got into cars and found people that were like you found these other, you know, groups of people that did different things, and you found out what worked and what didn't work, right? It was kind of the forum before the forum. And then you went to these shootouts and these different events and these different car shows, the Nopi Nationals, the Evo versus, STI shootouts. You went to, the Busher shootout. You did all these things because when you went, you saw this entirely different level of things that you hadn't seen before in your area. And then you came back with like, I know what I got to do. I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do this. But like that was the deal, right? There were people within that realm that had clout. And when they did stuff to their car, when they bought stuff for their car, that's the stuff that you went out and bought too. And it wasn't a conscious effort of you trying to be like them. It was a conscious effort of like, man, they know what's going on. Like I'm in on that. You know what I mean?
There's a lot to be. It's like experiencing events in person through a digital device, right? And hearing sort of the visceral sounds, like whether you go to a concert or a car show, there's only so many videos you can watch to kind of see what's going on in a car show versus experiencing it in person. The microphones aren't translating things properly, or just sort of what the camera is perceiving versus what your eyes are actually perceiving. We're losing that perception in, sort of this journey of numbers and YouTube.
Yeah, like I know you guys can share this, although the situations are always different. There's been that thing, right? You've been at some car event, and it might have been an E36 back when they were still new, that turned out onto the road and wrapped it and then shifted, and you saw the ass end tuck, and then there's these little things, or some guy pulling into a parking lot and like purging NOS. You know what I mean? There's these little things that made you just go, like, I gotta be like that. There's these moments in real life, and it's not just a visual thing on a phone with bad sound. It's the energy of the whole thing, all the senses. And that's car culture. It's real. It's a real thing. It's a tangible thing. It can't totally be lived on a device. Yeah. Like,
insert Mustang meme here.
What's that?
Insert Mustang meme here.
Right.
I think the hard part is this, is like, you can't, how do I say this the right way? Like, you don't know what you don't know, right? Like I can't, when I think about it for years, when you used to get like the SEMA coverage of the SEMA show in some of these books, and you would see these cars that were in the book, and everybody's like, oh, those are the sickest cars. And I remember going up to some of them and going, they didn't even have belts on the cars. Like, they didn't run. Like, right. You were given all the credit to these cars, but really, in reality, the reason they were in there is because they were paid advertisers or something, or sure, the car was tied in with one of the local buddies or the hookups or the homies or whatever it was, right? And so, you start to get into the things. There is a level of when you can go to some of these things and see a car that is so mind-blowing that it doesn't matter what genre it is. When you can stand in front of a car and you're just, all you see are details. When you look at a car and all you see is craftsmanship. When you look at a car and realize that everything is just, unbelievable, to the point where you're walking around the car for 25, 30 minutes and you just can't stop seeing new things. That's when you really realize, like, wow, this is not the same as the others. Like, you have to, like, if you, like, as somebody that, like, really likes to build cars, one of my biggest things, and I saw it this year at SEMA. I will tell you that there were some cars out there that I thought were, well done. I think that the quality of a SEMA build has degraded because I think people expect less now, but that's a whole other story. I think that there were some cars that were mind-blowing for me, and I think one of them is something that I'm totally not even into. There was a car in our hall, like a mini truck. Did you see that with all the engravings and everything on the engine and everything?
Mm-mm.
It was wild. It was. Yeah. So Kyle Cross walked up to me and he was like, "Did you go see that thing?" I was like, "No, not at all." He's like, "You got to go look at it." He's like, "You just got to look at it." And I walked down there and I sat there for like 15 minutes looking at this thing, and I'm like, it didn't matter that I'm not into mini trucks. It didn't matter that wasn't my scene. It didn't matter anything about it. You couldn't help but think, like, man, if I was going to do this one piece, this would take me weeks. But he did all this stuff. Like, you kept looking at it like, man, like, this is, you can't buy that. You can't go somewhere and say, hey, I would like to get this go. Like, it's such a level that if you tried to pay and commission that, you would be broke. Like, you couldn't, like, you got to do that stuff yourself, right? So I think it's a pretty interesting journey to watch a car enthusiast develop, right? But that's why I cling to the whole thing about that level of enthusiast, right? Because the problem is that I think there are a lot of people, and I think about, like, even some of, like, the younger people within our family, right? Maybe the nephews or nieces or whatever, maybe they're of driving age. They watch a couple of these YouTubers in automotive. They like cars. They've done a few things to their cars, never worked on a car a day in their life, like, wouldn't even think about it, drops the car off if they want to have something installed or whatever. But they're into cars. They don't really know what they don't know, right? They don't know when you go see a car, like, that was on the internet. You see a car, you give it a quick double click, and you're like, yeah, that car's rad. You look at a few pictures of it, dope. Oh, wow, look how clean the engine bay is. But, like, they don't know what it's like to look at the details of it and, like, follow the harness around the corner and under the manifold. And, wow, look how much time he took to redo this stuff. So it's the details, I think, that get lost with kind of some of the internet stuff. You don't get to really see every little piece and nuance. And I think from people like us, the older people that, like, had that experience of going to some of these other shows and other things and really seeing these builds in real life, at the point where bolt-ons were a thing but not really a thing, right? Or at the point where bolt-ons were a thing, but it was always acknowledged that, there was a level that once you did your bolt-ons, you also did this stuff, right? And I think now the hard part is that, like, to me, the reason I think I've kind of just gotten to a point where with a lot of car shows that I struggle to go to them is because you end up walking around and you realize that it's all bolt-ons. There's very, very little, custom fab work or really, unique things. A lot of this is like, who bought the most expensive parts and kept them the cleanest, right? And, like, I'm not saying there's not a place for it. I'm just telling you that, like, from my perspective, like, I could look at a build that was hand built, all day long. But those other cars, a few minutes and I'm ready to move on,
Well, I mean, it's the old position of bought, not built, or built versus bought, and we're losing the built side of it in favor of the bought aspect of it.
Yeah, but you go to, like,
nature. That's natural, I think.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you go to the golden age of imports, for example, the Hondas, the Mitsubishis of, like, the 90s or whatever. Like, the parts were exciting. You know what I mean? Like if you had a Honda, man, you bought your intake manifold and your throttle body and all your skunk 2 stuff and your big loud intake, and like you pop the hood and the engine just made 160 horsepower, but it was the stoutest looking thing, you know. They just were angry and they were cool to look at, and it was totally addictive to do that stuff. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I had parts for my Eclipse before I had my Eclipse. Like
I did the same thing. I did the same exact thing.
But stack. You look at, again, we're in the tech age, man. We're in the age of the geek, and so like, you know, if you get a GTI or whatever a new car is, it's just boop, beep, bop, bop. You get your stage 1, your stage 2, you know, or your stage 1, then your intake, exhaust, and intercooler in stage 2, then you're at whatever it is, 350 horsepower, and you're done. So then what else we're living in it's like you were saying, back when we were younger, everything was localized. We had to physically be there. And I think that we're in an age of like this global overexposure now. Everything is on like a global stage. We're looking at cars in the UK at 3 a.m. on our, you know, phones or whatever. Like it's crazy. And I think that overexposure can be and is a bad thing. Like, I think that I did this again to bring up jet skis because it's the best kind of, you know, metaphor I have. But like when I got into jet skis, all of a sudden everybody's inviting you to the pages on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is. And you go, yeah, sure. But then after a couple of weeks, it's like every other post is a jet ski. And I was like, I'm already getting saturated. I'm already getting tired of something. It has put the lifespan into like super fast forward, you know, and I think that's part of the
That is the problem. It's not part of the problem. That's the problem. The problem is that information moves so quickly that it requires us to basically either match that speed to be able to get that attention, or it requires us to basically tune out. Like you don't get, there's no middle, right? And you know, look, I think what's interesting about like some of these YouTube channels is like I think about like in Matt Armstrong. I'm not sure, Willie, you probably don't even know who I'm talking about, but the dude has, you know, definitely a few million subs, obviously up there with the lengths of people that have, you know, really large YouTube reputations of followings. Really was just a dude that started out years ago buying cars that were wrecked and basically trying to put them back together. The reason I like those channels so much, and the reason I still watch them, you know, the Chris is from the B is from Builds. I mean, he's gone a different direction, I think, from when he originally started. But like, you know, even like, you know, like the Tavares's and you know, and stuff like that is because I really like the fact that somewhere in there is a craftsmanship piece. Now, you can argue different levels, right, from different skill sets or whatever it may be. But like, you know, I want to see somebody cut the quarter off a car and be like, yeah, this is how I fixed it. Maybe they're not right. I'm good with that too. Like, you know what I mean? Like, hey, how are we going to get this thing to stick? There's no welds in this thing. Oh, it's held on with panel bond. You know what I mean? Like I want to see that stuff. And, you know, the truth is, and I'll say this kind of in the same weird mix, is that one of my friends that is now, you know, I've become very, very friendly with. He's one of my neighbors. He lives down the block from me. I talk about him kind of a decent amount. His and he owns like a towing and recovery business, right? The coolest thing is that besides the fact we've become very friendly and, you know, we build cool car stuff, is the fact that he's always got something different going on. He's into hot rods. He's got, you know, he's got race cars. He builds race cars. He's got heavy equipment and trailers and car haulers and all this stuff. And just the exposure I get just from hanging out in his neck of the woods, I get to see things and work on things that I would have never, ever touched. Yeah. Now, I'm not telling you that I'm going to go out and buy a car hauler. I'm not even telling you, but like the fact that, like, I'll work on something just for the idea of having a different level of exposure for me is fun, right? And I just think like having these channels be able to, as much as there's an overexposure level, I kind of think about it like this. I think of YouTube as a television back in the day of having a satellite dish. My neighbor had a satellite dish when we had regular cable at home when I was a kid. And I remember going over to his house for the first time, and the dude had like 1,000 channels, like straight up picking up Russia, like, you know what I mean? Like with his satellite dish. And the thing was huge. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh my God, this thing has 1,000 channels. Like I literally was going one by one, like watching different countries. I mean, and I guess what I'm trying to say is that even within that 1,000 channels, there may only be 100 that you would ever really ever watch. Right? Like, and the thing with YouTube, there's, hundreds of thousands of car, YouTube channels. But at the end of the day, you're going to pick and gravitate towards the stuff that lines up with you, right? Like, if you were into YouTube, I believe that the people that you would ultimately stumble on or that you would end up consuming would be very much aligned with your vision. You know what I mean? Just because that's what YouTube allows you to do. It allows you to kind of be the car person you want to be or consume the type of car content that you want to consume. So that was always my point with S3 being on YouTube, was the fact that you were furthering the brand by putting your brand out there just in a documentation stand so that those people that align with you could align with you. You know what I mean? But,
yeah,
that was my take on it. I don't know.
Yeah, we just didn't. We didn't go with it. We gave it the good college try for a little while.
Right.
And, one of our first videos popped off pretty good. Got like 50,000 views pretty quick.
That was the CRX one.
That was the CRX.
Yep.
And then, this is like, again, we've made like less than 10 videos or something like that. Then the next video was where I put that Hellcat through a mailbox.
Which was fantastic.
You think would be, it was unintentional, but that's like prime YouTube content right there.
So good.
At the expense of my pride. But yeah, that one went.
I get it.
And then hit a wall. It went to 20,000 and then stopped at 20,000 and never moved. And then, past that, I mean, we've had hits then and again that do certain things. I just don't like, it takes so much energy to make a YouTube video and you have no control. It is not your audience. It is Gmail or Google's audience that, they're deciding who's going to see it. We, S3, post-print era, have had a lot better luck on the Reels and on TikToks, sharing things that we're passionate about in short bursts that's unrehearsed. And that's kind of where we found our groove, so to speak. I don't know, man.
I have another question for you.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to cut you off, but I think it's super important that I ask this now. Like you said, you've had some good success on TikTok. You guys kind of hit there in the right timing, made some cool content. What happens if this whole U.S. ban goes through in 6 months and TikTok is banned in the U.S.?
I'll laugh. I don't care.
I know that. But what I'm saying is, from a brand perspective of S3's kind of total ability to be visible to its market.
Yeah, but see, S3, like, we can still reach our print subscribers even though we're not printing. Like, if the whole world goes upside down more than it is, we can still, if YouTube shuts down tomorrow, if they ban TikTok and that sets a precedent to ban Meta, or Meta turns into an evil monster or whatever it is, like, we can reach people our own way. This is a serious concern that I've always had with like YouTube. Like, you see what they do to the firearm world. Like, what happens when these totally woke dudes that run these big tech companies end up going, hey, cars are bad. They're bad for the environment. We're trying to push EV. And these car enthusiast guys that represent 6% of all cars, they're a real thorn in our ass. So shut them down. Shut them down. We don't want to hear from Dude in Blue or Gingy. Those are the only two YouTubers I know.
I understand.
But you know what I mean? Like, we don't want to hear from these guys anymore. Then they have lost their entire voice. It sucks for them. And while I'd snicker for a second, like, the bigger problem is their entire voice is on a platform that's not theirs. That is effing dangerous. Like, that's not a good position for car culture to be in.
But that's not entirely new, though, because, I mean, distribution houses for publications could do that back in the day. You could lose areas like, that they didn't want to distribute your magazine in certain locations. You're sort of in the same situation.
Yeah, as an independent print magazine, we never had that problem. We put copies into Motivicity when they were a thing, and that went out to shops, and there was no way that anybody can really stop that from happening until Turn 14 bought Motivicity. They could stop that from happening. But you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, we can, it's a much smaller number than what a big YouTuber would get, but like, we can reach people without any outside influences, without any algorithms. Hot rodding and car culture was literally built on non-conformity. And the fact that these influencers have to conform to algorithms is an oxymoron. You can't, it's just, I grew up, like I said at the beginning of this thing, man, I grew up in the 90s on punk rock and these kind of, like, that is ingrained into who I am, is like, just don't conform. And cars are a part of that. Car culture is a part of that. I like to express myself when I drive. I like my car to be my little avatar. It has nothing to do with clout or money or anything like that, man. It's just an expression.
Yeah.
It's the only way I can put it.
No,
And I don't know, man. You blinded me with YouTube, or you blindsided me at YouTube at the very beginning, because I don't think about it. Like, it's not like I'm sitting here going, man, I wish we were bigger at YouTube. I mean, if we were bigger, I'd put the time into it, but I'm not going to put 10 hours into editing a video so that it can maybe get some views. Like, It's just not, it's not where my time's spent. And again, I'm a writer. Like, I think that I am better at talking to people's inner voice and soul. You know what I mean? I am just not the guy to go, what's up, guys? Welcome to the whatever YouTube channel. Today I'm going to tell you how to K-swap a Miata. But before I do, let me tell you the story about this time I wrote. It's just stupid to me.
Listen, but all right. So, like, I'm going to play this out, and then we'll shut her down.
One more thing.
Yeah.
It's also stereotypically, I'm not talking about every YouTuber, you know what I mean? But what we have trended to, it is what I call selfish media. S3, for better or for worse, was never about Jonathan Wooley, right? Like, we were here to celebrate the culture. We were here to pull out the things that inspired us, that we saw that was cool. It was never about perfection. It was about, grit and style and attitude. Mm-hmm. And then I tried to write it in a way that inspired people. It was bigger. I'd like to think it still is. It's bigger than cars. I'm not talking about cars and car features. I'm talking about the fact that the world is pulling you away from maybe what your soul wants to be doing. And I'm trying to, be like, hey, look, it's okay. Like, this car stuff is crazy. Like, we're all insane, but if we're insane together and we do this, there's values and there's gifts inside of car culture that are bigger than actual cars. But, that's what S3 was always about. YouTube, stereotypically, is about, hey, look at me. Look at what I'm doing. Like me. Follow me. Subscribe to me. It's not my generation.
No, for sure.
Like, we were not about that. Like, the self-promotion now is God. It's just, you know what I mean? Like, they do not hold back from self-promoting. It just feels icky to me.
Well, and the hard part is that, like, everybody is their own media company now, with the exception of the fact that the media that they're publishing, like you pointed out, is obviously on content platforms that are kind of subject to who sees that viewership. Now, look, I mean, there's one final thought here, is that potentially, if for some reason some of these things got shut down, which I don't believe that they will, because that's how ad revenue is generated, it would almost be the big bang of automotive. Everything would reset, right? You'd start to see websites pop back up. You'd start to see blogs pop back up. You'd start to see more forums become active, and it would just be because the outlet was shut down and kind of return to where it came from. But at the end of the day, I don't see that happening. There'll always be another platform, but that's what it is. It will always be another platform.
Yeah. I think the big danger here is, and I talk about this all the time with these big tech platforms. We have watched in the last 5 years car culture basically take the money out of this industry, and think of money in this case as power, right? Like we're a niche culture. So you want to keep it in the family, right? Like it should go from the advertiser to the media. The media inspires, the kids, and it comes back to the advertiser, and it works like that. But what we've seen happen is like this whole industry, man, like for the most part has started giving the money to big tech. Big tech is like is big tech going to come on your podcast? Is Facebook going to come on your podcast? Hell no. Like they don't care about your podcast.
Hold on 1 second. We have big hopes that Zuckerberg's coming on.
Zuckerberg ain't coming on the.
Oh, stop it!
Zuckerberg ain't coming.
Listen, we're just We're one good tweet away from Elon Musk himself, popping on here.
All right. So my point, just quickly, when that money leaves and it goes to big tech, which has different visions of an automotive future than us, it ain't coming back. Big tech ain't coming on the coming podcast. They're not going to the big car show. They're not going to Riverside. They don't care. If you advertise on that for your show and it gets rained out or Corona happens and you have to cancel your event, they don't make it right like a magazine would. Like the big danger here is that, and YouTubers are kind of a victim of this because their platform is on big tech. But like what we've seen car culture do is give up the money, let it leave car culture, let it go to big tech. It's not coming back. Car culture is suffering as a result. I mean, just look around, do a real world test at what's going on. Like we are losing our strength. We are losing our voice. We're getting more views than ever, but we're doing it in our own little circles and we're disconnected from each other. It's in my opinion, I'm looking at it through a bias filtered lens because, S3 was a victim of that. I mean, still is. Like we lose advertisers. The advertisers are definitely spending money, but they're spending it on Meta and they're spending it on Google and they're spending it to keep up with the other guys. But long term, you're going to lose those real voices and you're going to get the voices that the algorithm decides you're going to get. And that's the danger of doing it like this.
Do you fear? I don't want to say fear. Do you feel that there's a potential here that the same vision and same issues you're talking about is the equivalent of maybe a messenger company back in the 1800s that had their entire fleet with horseback, and then the car was introduced, and they're like, you don't want to use that thing. Like you're gonna end up in all sorts of problems. There's you don't get to enjoy nature. You're not riding on what God gave us. Like you got these machines. Like, you know what I mean? Like, do you feel that there's a part of you that is just so looked at what you're missing that we're not looking at the other avenue that went forward?
I mean, that's the adapt or die mentality. I think you can adapt and die. I think that there is an authenticity that is lost.
Yep.
Maybe it's nostalgia. It's probably fact and nostalgia mixed up in one. But, we're seeing the result, dude. I mean, look around. Look at car culture. Is it what it was? No, it's a digital kind of fake, phony, Instagram filtered vision of what it was.
But listen, that's a derivative. That's a derivative of what people want. And I hate to say it like that because I know there's a little bit of the cart before the horse kind of thing, right?
Well, hold on. Is it what they want, or is it because it's being delivered to them easier?
Well, but here's the thing. You can say that that's the case, but at the end of the day, like, there's a reason that children, and when I say children, I'm now really dating myself, but there's a reason that kids, like when I was 13, 14, 15, like I was all about cars. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I fantasized about the day I could get my license. On my birthday, my dad's birthday gift to me was making sure that I went to go to the DMV to get my permit. Like,
Same.
You know what I mean? Like that was my birthday present. And then I remember we drove home and I remember him pulling over when we got to the neighborhood and said, all right, let's try this thing. You know what I mean? And I guess, from the time I was 13 years old, all I wanted to do was have cars. And then at 16, I got my first car, and then I realized that I didn't really know anything about them. And I joined a couple forums. I started to like take some things apart, put things back together. When I was 18, I really took something apart, couldn't put it back together. I think that was the big, shot fired across the world. Like, oh man, I'm gonna have to seriously get better at this. And then, as we go on, like I just started taking things apart, and eventually I got this mentality of, I looked at cars very much like a pile of nuts and bolts. And I think once you got to that level, there was the fear kind of went away. Like, hey, if I take this apart, as long as I remember where all this stuff goes back, I could put this back together. And then obviously you learn some of your mistakes along the way, but those mistakes allow you to be better at what you do. And I think that's anything in life, right? So the problem is that now a kid that's coming up, like, their whole thing about getting a license isn't there because they got Uber and they don't care. And the fact is that this is the device that they use to control their entire life, right? So they're more focused at what revolves around this device and what comes into this device than they are about the idea of a car. And for us, I think a car was social media. And I think a car was the idea of having mobility and freedom, because you got that thing and it was like, oh, well, no one really can stop me. My neighborhood just grew exponentially as soon as I figured out I just had to push the right pedal and drive in the right direction. Whereas now I think it's just as simple for a lot of people as clicking an app and whatever it may be. But just because people were psyched on driving doesn't mean that they were all car enthusiasts either. So I don't know.
See, a car is real freedom. The phone is simulated freedom. It is digital freedom. And that's what S3 is trying to reach in this era. We're trying to reach the people, whether they're 20 or whether they're 45, that would rather be hands-on than, simulated. That would rather be in a garage taking apart something and they don't know if they can put it back together than be online. That would rather be unloading a mountain bike. Like it's a mentality, and it spans across the mountain bikes, the cars, the jet skis. You want to be out in the world, physically engaging with it. It's a real thing. Then you either get that or you don't.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, if the kids don't get it, I can't make them. All I can do is kind of show them what's possible. Yeah. And it's funny because I take these 15-year-old kids and I stick them in my Fiesta and it freaking knocks their socks off, dude. Like, they've seen the Ken Block videos. It didn't stick. They sit in a Fiesta with a big turbo on, and next thing you know, they got to have one. You know what I mean? Like,
It's like, how do we make the car digital detox?
We live in a world where a video gets 1 million views, yet when I go in my daughter's school parking lot,
Tesla,
what the, like, they're not there. It's stupid ass RAV4s or something. Like, yet when we were kids, we had none of the exposure. We just had to figure it out with car magazines, or somehow we instinctually knew that cars were rad. And that there was more than just transportation there.
Yeah. Now, can I venture to say that you don't own any Bitcoin?
No.
Sorry, that was my own.
No. I don't get roped into that. Probably for worse. I was going to say for better or worse.
No. I don't really. I struggle with that a little bit. That the intangible pieces of that, right? But listen, I think it's an interesting point. I think it's also kind of fun to be able to kind of look at the different parts of car culture as it exists. But, part of this is going to be kind of getting to a new type of enthusiast too. And I think that's the hard part, is that we're looking at a different level of enthusiast. And I say that from even, some of the people that work within these walls. We're all very different, even though we're very much the same, right? So it's a tough thing. I understand where you're coming from. You're obviously on the most extreme end of that, but I think there's still a level of people that where they may not be that, they still want to view that. You know what I mean?
Well, I've accepted that I'm on the extreme end. Like, I take pride in that. Yeah. I also agree that, like, I do love all aspects of car culture. I like the way, I was at a local car show in my town, and there's everything from new cars to old hot rods to old trucks and everything in between. And I love the fact of all the different interpretations of cool and of performance and stuff like that. I love it all. I just, the thing that I can't compromise on is like the essence, the soul of it. You know what I mean? Like when people don't get that, and especially as we, arguably transition to EVs, they don't understand. You know what I mean? It's that whole. It's just like, but the Tesla does it in 2 point whatever seconds. I'm like, look, we're not having the same conversation.
So the good news with this whole thing is, and here's the good news for us, I guess. I personally do not think that EV will transition into EV like EV has said that EV will transition into EV. Like, I just don't think it's possible. It's not a question of you could pass all the law and legislation you want. You can push this down everybody's throats. I believe there's going to become a very hard edge sticking point of realization in the next few years that will be like, wait a minute, hold on. Yeah, we're going to have to get there some other way.
We're already starting to see a bit of restraint. I mean, we're seeing some OEMs that are pulling out. I don't want to say pulling out, but they're slowing down their
backtracking is the word.
Yeah.
They're backtracking their previous promises. Yeah, no, yeah. I don't even care anymore. Honestly, look, I had no problem with EVs until they forced it. Right. And then that's when you got my attention. And I started kind of speaking out against it. I don't like the fact that it was sold under a lie. I think that's crap. But like, I don't care what people drive. Drive what you want to drive. If an EV fits your life, drive it. If anything, it just makes me kind of more amped up about the fact that I don't have to do that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've got the ability and the survival skills when it comes to car mechanics to where I can keep these cars running for the most part. You know what I mean? Like, what are you going to do? An old Honda, you can't kill that thing unless you drive it off a cliff. You know what I mean? Like, I'll blow it up. I fix it in a weekend. Like, it's not a big deal. And so I have no interest in signing up for a car that comes with $1,000 a month payment that I can't even service or wrench on. Yeah, y'all can keep that, dude. Like, the whole trying to turn cars into an iPhone driving experience, that's not for me. And I feel like, look, you guys can do what you want, but it's on us, the car enthusiasts here, to try and explain why, right? Like that's our job at this point. Like, listen, this is why this stuff sucks, and this is why what we do is cool. Now make your decision. You know what I mean? Like, it's ultimately up to them, but at least we have to try. We got a world full of these influencers and stuff that are just going to say whatever the hell, the person giving them the product or whatever tells them to say. And that's not doing it. It reminds me of the 90s when skate culture. What happened? Can you guys still see me or not?
Yeah, you're good.
We're good.
Okay, cool. I think I got a call or something. My screen went haywire. But it reminds me of the 90s when skateboarding kind of took skateboarding back. You know what I mean? And it got into a point of total corporatized, and then the guys that were the guys for life took it back. It's kind of where car culture is. If none of us take it back, like it's gone. It's history, and we'll be able to do it for the rest of our lives. But that love affair with the automobile that was kind of like just understood, speaking the language of cars, that's going to die. Unless we teach people what it is. You got guys out there like Akio Toyota from Toyota. He's doing that. You know what I mean? But all these other car companies that are, whatever, just trying to appease Wall Street, they're not going to do it, man. They're not. Mechanics are out. Tech is in. You know what I mean? And unless we start to fight that, we're going to lose.
Well, listen, we're going to end it on that, but I will say this. I would right now tell everybody to go follow you on social media, but you've clearly made a case today that they should not do so. So
write me a letter.
Write him a letter with a stamp. We want a stamp, damn it. But Wooley, S3 Magazine, been kind of telling people what it is since 2006.
Yeah, if you guys, can at least respect or like anything that I've kind of ranted about, check out the app. It's S3 Magazine. We still use the word magazine because that's what we came from. Right. I kind of like the fact that it's dead and that's where we're from. You know what I mean? So like, you can check us out. The app is free. Like, it helps us out. You know what I mean? As far as like our numbers or whatever, but the app is free. You can just check it when you want to. And yeah, I mean, by all means, follow us on everything is S3 Magazine. So you can follow us on TikTok. You can follow us on Instagram. If you
Don't
message
you
me
dare go to YouTube. If you go to YouTube,
not-
John will send you a message.
Go to the S3 YouTube.
Avoid YouTube like the plague.
Right.
No, but yeah. And if you message us on Instagram and we don't respond, it's not personal. It's because I forget how to do that kind of stuff.
And if that doesn't sell it, I don't know what does.
Whatever, dude. If people have listened this far, I'm just appreciative for that.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for coming on, man. It's always fun talking to you. If nothing else, it's a good conversation.
Thank you.
Yep, that's what I would go with.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, we'll catch y'all next Wednesday. That y'all was inspired by Jonathan Wooley, by the way.
All right.
Peace out.
See you.